Welcome back, viewers around the world. So we are continuing with the show integration, and we have Mr. Brian Concannon with us, and we're gonna talk now about two things that they should understand them, and how they might affect their lives in terms of resettling in the U.S. So we choose like these two things, like misdemeanors and felonies. So those are legal term, and Brian gonna enlighten us a, a little bit about them and what people should understand when they live in the U.S. and how they go about to make decision in their lives, what they should do and what probably they should not do. So, Brian, would you like to, explain to the viewer when we're talking about misdemeanor, what is that versus felonies?
Sure. The general rule is a misdemeanor is a minor infraction, something like a speeding ticket. And a felony is something very serious, like murder. And those are kind of examples, those are sort of far ends of the spectrum. And there's obviously a lot in between, and it's a little bit complicated because different states, in the United States, every state has its own criminal law, and different states call different things felonies or different things misdemeanors. But the general rule is misdemeanors are less serious things and felonies are more serious things that can get you more jail time. Misdemeanors often it's very light jail time, or you pay a fine, things like that. Felonies typically you're in jail for 3 years or longer, up to life. And that's important for immigration because they have felonies and misdemeanors have different immigration consequences. But it's also important to note that's not the only thing. So you can have, like, drug crimes, for example, are treated extremely seriously on immigration, even if it's a misdemeanor. So in Massachusetts now, possession of marijuana is legal, but before that, or in a state that where possession of marijuana is not legal, typically it's a misdemeanor. It's treated like a speeding ticket. But under federal immigration law, that can be a reason for excluding somebody from the United States, even just the fact that they got picked up with a small amount of marijuana, which is legal in Massachusetts and Oregon and Colorado and California. But if you go to a state where it's not legal, that can actually get you deported. And there's other crimes they call crimes of moral turpitude that involve dishonesty, things like that. Even though they can be misdemeanors, they can exclude you. So it's a little bit careful, and nobody should say, unless you've really talked to a lawyer, no one should say, well, I'm going to do this misdemeanor because it's not going to have any immigration consequences. You're best off not doing anything and not getting caught in that trap. But so if you have something that is a felony, that can mean you're deported, even if you are a legal permanent resident. And there's been lots of people. One of the things, I'm not an immigration lawyer, and that's actually important for the audience to understand. What I do two things. I work on immigration policy, so we try to push Congress to have more fair policies. The second thing I do is I serve as an expert in asylum and deportation cases. And it's very sad. I have lots of cases where someone was brought to the U.S. when they were 2 or 3, very young. They've lived their whole life in the U.S. They really don't know anything about Haiti. And then they get caught on a fairly minor charge, and they're deported because they're permanent residents. They never got citizenship. So one thing to think about is move up to citizenship when you can. Don't let that drag. If you have the opportunity to become a citizen because you have a lot more protections. And if you are a permanent resident and you get caught on a felony, on a drug crime, you can be deported immediately. And it can also prevent you from becoming a citizen, and it can prevent almost any kind of advancing on immigration if you have a felony conviction. Now, so it's important that's really important at 2 stages. The first stage is when you're deciding what to do. And general legal advice is don't do it because, especially if you're not a citizen, just the consequences of very small things can be very large. Something that for a citizen you get a speeding ticket, for someone who's a permanent resident, that can be a life-changing event. The second place where you need to be careful is if you don't take my advice, and and you or your family member does get arrested for something, make sure that your lawyer understands the criminal, the immigration consequences. So if you have an infraction, you go to court, you'll have a lawyer to represent you. A lot of times lawyers, even lawyers who are very good at doing criminal defense work, they don't always understand the immigration. So make sure they're aware of that. And I've had cases where where a lawyer either didn't understand or didn't know. Sometimes we've had cases where people told their lawyer they were citizens because they thought they were citizens, and then finds out that their parents didn't fill out paperwork and they end up getting deported. So people need to be very careful. We've had lots of people I've seen lots of cases where people have pled guilty. They said they weren't guilty, but they pled guilty because they got no time and they risked, if they got found guilty, going to jail, and they thought it was a good deal. It was a good deal, except when the immigration authorities come and say you're being deported. So be very careful if you are involved in the criminal justice system. Be very careful that your lawyer understands the immigration consequences of whatever you do in the criminal justice system.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So all the viewers, the point that one of the point Brian has made, it's about if you are in any criminal, let's say court trial, make sure if there is any implication of immigration in it, make sure that the lawyer knows about it and your immigration lawyer know about it as well, so they can help you. So in terms of, I talked to many people and I found there is a misunderstanding among the newcomers, immigrants here. So when someone becomes a U.S. citizen, is this person still subject to the immigration law? Because I found people, they said that, oh, you can get deported, people talking that way. So is it something happened that way? When someone, when you're talking, you said that if someone, you have legal status, permanent legal status, you have a green card, if you can move, having your citizenship. So when the person has the citizenship, that means the person is no longer a subject of immigration law. Is it something we can say?
Yeah, that's a good question. And your broader statement about how there's a lot of misunderstanding is very important. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the reason why there's misunderstanding is that immigration law is really complicated and it changes all the time. So that's why, I keep saying you as much as possible consult experts. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that things can change. So again, the family unification or the public charge is different now than it was 2 months ago. So you really need to talk to people who are up to date. And immigration lawyers and immigration service providers, and there's some nonprofit ones. There's plenty, especially in the Boston area. There's many very good immigration lawyers. There's also very good nonprofits that help people. They stay up to date and they can give you the best advice. But so on the citizenship, so the general rule is if you're a citizen, then immigration law does not apply to you. One exception is that if the government can go back and say that your immigration was fraudulently obtained. So let's say I was born in Haiti and I was convicted of a drug offense in Haiti, and then I come to the United States and get my green card, don't get caught on anything in the United States, get my green card, and then get my citizenship. On your citizenship form, you and I believe also your green card form, you swear a lot of things, and one of them is that you've never been convicted of a drug offense. And what the government has been doing in some cases is going back and saying to, in a case like mine, well, Brian, you lied to get your citizenship. That was a fraudulently obtained citizenship, so we're going to revoke that. Okay. We revoke that. You're now a non-citizen. We apply the immigration law to you. You're deported. Yeah.
Okay. So I believe it's clear for the viewers to understand. You understand that once you become a U.S. citizen, there are certain things, if you have done in the past, for instance, fraudulent activity, lying for immigration benefit, if the government go back, that might affect and they might revoke it based on the information we've just sharing with you. And we would like to make sure that all the viewers understand that and we don't live in a confusion world and having pressure, because this country, it's a country that has a lot of pressure in it, and I'm sure that when you have the correct information, that can help you to ease the pressure. So Brian, as we are about to end this segment of integration, so what is your general advice for immigrants who are in the U.S. and newcomers who come here? So in other, like in terms of legal aspect, so that can help them, making right decision and do the right thing, so they would not put in jeopardy their lives, their family lives, and even leave them in hardship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the first thing is to obey the law as much as possible, and some of the things that people have gotten caught in, and I tell you the truth, I don't believe it's in Massachusetts, but other states, like drunk driving can be a felony, and I think in Massachusetts your second or third offense can, and so just be careful of things like that that you know is illegal. You may not think it's a felony, but think about it. I mean, you should obviously think about it before you get behind a car with too much to drink, but really be aware of how this can change your life and your family's life very quickly. And again, always, if you do get entangled with the justice system, make sure that you're getting advice from people who understand the law and are up to date. The other issue is kind of the broader issue of why these laws are in place. And a lot of these laws, I mean, you see them all the time. You say, this can't be fair. And I see these cases, and it's just so sad. Somebody who's lived their whole life, they've had, a good. So one case I worked on just last week, somebody had, when he was like 16, had a small drug offense. 8 years later, he's got a family, he's built a business, lived an exemplary life, no problems. Now he's getting deported. He's got a wife, he's got a kid, he's got a business, all that he's losing, and he's leaving his wife and his kid because of this offense back when he was a little kid. That is not only, I mean, he obviously should have been more careful when he was 16, but that's obviously just a terrible way for the United States to treat people who are contributing to the society. And a lot of that is political, in the sense that we have, Congress and the executive branch who are enforcing these laws, and they are there because people voted for them. And that's something, should we talk about in the later segment, or do you want me to talk about that more right now?
Yeah, you can talk about it.
So that's, we all need to think about that when we vote, or when we make a decision not to vote, because I think one of the things that's happening on immigration is that there's a lot of people who are supportive of rights and fair treatment of immigrants, but don't vote. I mean, a lot of times people, it's hard for people in the immigrant community, often whose English isn't great. They don't know the system. People don't know where to vote or whether they're eligible to vote. It's very important that everybody who's a citizen, and you have to be a citizen to vote. Everybody who's a citizen vote, and they make sure that they tell all their friends and family who are citizens to vote as well, because if we got a higher vote turnout, then we'd have better laws. And that's especially true. I mean, it's true in Massachusetts, although most of the Massachusetts congressional delegation, I'd say all of them, are very supportive of fair treatment of immigrants. But it's really important in places like Florida, where there are a lot of immigrants, and you have, it's kind of a split state between Democrats and Republicans, so a little bit increase in the turnout can change who wins the president, can change who's the senator, who's the representatives. So I would, the most important thing I tell people to do who care about treatment of immigrants in the United States, I say tell your friends and family in Florida to vote. And just to be clear, I'm not saying that, so I'm a board member of the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti, which is a nonprofit which is not allowed to do kind of election type advocacy. I'm saying that as me, Brian Concannon, just an individual, not on the part of any organization. That's just what I tell people. I say tell your friends and family in Florida to vote, but also everywhere else. We need to get people engaged in the process. And even within the United States, and this is actually, I mean, even within Massachusetts, this is a good example. If people tell, we have generally all of our members of Congress are going to kind of vote the right way on most immigration bills. But they've got a lot on their plate, and there's some things they put more energy in, and there's some things they put less energy in. Even though they believe it, they've got other things they have to do. The more we reach out, the more they're going to take leadership on it. And we've seen this over and over again and especially with the Haitian community, when we engage with leaders, they say, okay, we're getting this feedback from the Haitian community. They tell us they want to do it. And when they do the right thing, you thank them. You send a quick call or an email saying, thank you for doing that. People like to hear good news. They like to hear positive feedback. And we can get our leaders who are already going to do the right thing, but they'll do the right thing more and take more leadership if their constituents are asking them to do it.
I like the point you make about voting, which is like how that impact immigrants who live in the U.S., especially in Massachusetts, because the laws or whoever get elected to represent the people, it's based on our votes. So people, when you go to vote, that has, let's say, an indirect impact to their lives. So one thing I would like to ask you, like, I don't know if I had experience working in the voting system here because I was an inspector doing the voting and see how things going on. So what do you think would hinder or make it hard in terms of the immigrants community when they become a U.S. citizen and they less engaged into the voting process? What do you think?
I think it's a couple of things. I think to some extent, often people who are new citizens are just very busy. They have young kids, they have a job, 2 jobs, 3 jobs. That's one. And a second is, and it's often hard to get out of work to vote. But one thing you can do on that is most places in Massachusetts and in the United States now have this early voting. So if you're working during the election day, you can often go into town hall 2 days, 3 days, 4 days beforehand, and you can vote. So I'd suggest that if people can't get away on election day. A second thing is, I think the language barrier is hard. A lot of people whose English isn't quite up to speed, and I lived in Haiti for 9 years, and
wow.
So I know, and I struggled with Creole and French, and Haitians were very accommodating and generous and hospitable to work through my language problems. But in the United States, people don't always have that experience, and people can be intimidated by the language barrier. I'd suggest go with a friend whose English is better. Go with someone who can help you out and help navigate the process. There's other things that are more nefarious. One of the things that's happening is that the Republican Party has made, and again, I'm speaking this as a personal, not through IJDH, the Republican Party has made, it's one of their electoral strategies. In some states, it's their main electoral strategy, is to keep people from voting. They try to keep African Americans, they try to keep immigrants away from voting, and they do things like there's been reports of police pulling over people who are perceived to be Hispanic or foreign in some way around voting sessions. Literally, especially in Florida, this has happened. People are getting pulled over in their car a block away from the voting. Obviously, that's going to deter people. We need to fight that, but also need to show that doesn't work. And there's maybe there's a bunch of different ways around that. Go with a group of 10 people. Go with your pastor of your church. Go with community leaders, people who can go with lawyers, people who can stand up with you, so that you're able to to organize your way around any kind of intimidation. Fortunately, I'm not aware of any voter intimidation in Massachusetts. Another reason to be grateful that we live here. But in other states, it actually really is a problem. And I don't blame people for saying, I'm not going to take that risk. But when the voting intimidation works, it works to create bad policy. And so I'd encourage people as much as possible to try to find ways to overcome the intimidation.
Okay. So all the viewers, you are still listening to Integration, which is a show that provide you information, especially for people who are resettled in the U.S., things you need to know, things that are very helpful in order to make decision. We have as our guest Mr. Brian Concannon, and he just talked about importance of voting and how that related to determination of who gonna make decision on your behalf. Like as if you are immigrants, you become a U.S. citizen, and how it is important, your vote count. So we are at the end of the show, and we thank you, Brian Concannon, for accepting to come to the show, and your expertise on the issues we've been talking about has been very helpful. And I don't know if you have a last word.
Just gratitude. Thank you very much for including me in the show. This has been a really interesting discussion, and keep up your good work.
Thank you, and goodbye, all the viewers. See you for the next show.